So I always had a love of the water, as long as I can remember. You know, building Revell plastic pirate ships before I even saw the water. When my father got a boat, I was all about it. I was in it 100%, both doing whatever was needed to make that boat ready to get on the water, and then getting out there and having all sorts of adventures as we bumbled our way through learning how it all works. My name is John Brady, and I am a builder, an adventurer, and a student. My father was a master sergeant in the Army, and because of that, I traveled from Texas to Germany. Over the course of my childhood, I went to 6th grade schools. That's how often we moved. And I think that was very formative. It made me much more open and much more tuned to a sense of adventure. And when he retired from the Army, he bought a boat that needed a lot of attention. I was 11 or 12, and that's where I got started sailing. We learned how to sail together, which was a trip, you know, drill sergeant dad, and he wasn't given the subtlety, but I stuck by him through thick and thin doing that, and actually eventually wound up with that boat myself. So the trip that made me into a sailor took place when I was in my 20s, and my two brothers and I, both of whom are younger than me, took that 23-foot boat from Toms River, New Jersey, to Martha's Vineyard, Nantucket, down into the Sound, back up to Martha's Vineyard, Nantucket, and Cape Cod, and then down to Oyster Bay, where we hauled it out and towed it the rest of the way home. We had no engine, we had oars, and you know, we were out at sea, crossing the New York Bight, ships and whatnot. It's kind of foggy, navigating with a plastic sextant and a compass. You know, it was the real deal. And that summer, we did that, you know, 3-4 months, and by the end of it, we were sailors. That was no question. Everything from how you cook on a boat to how you get it to where you want to go. That actually was the foundation of all the work that I did subsequently. At the end of that sailing trip, we wound up in New York looking for work, and were able to get a job on the Peking at the South Street Seaport Museum. That was my first museum job. And I became very enamored of the historic ship scene as a result of working there for a year. And when that job ended, I came down to Philadelphia looking for work and ended up with a job for at least a few months on the Gazella, which is a 3-masted barkentine based here in Philadelphia. That led to working for what was then the Philadelphia Maritime Museum as a boat builder. And what we were doing was building examples of boats that were used on the Delaware River and the Jersey Shore. We'd do an exhibit about a type of boat, we'd build an example of it, and then we'd take it out and sail it. As time went on, the boats got bigger and bigger as this happened, right? And towards the end of that 7-year period, we built our first A-class catboat, which is a class of boat that races on the Barnegat Bay. And after that boat was done, I was ready to move on. I wanted to do bigger things. So I actually left the museum at that point. Went to Nova Scotia, worked on a schooner for 6 months up there as a builder and sailing it. And then down to Baltimore to do a big job on the Gazella in a dry dock down there. And then wound up taking care of Gazella, Jupiter, the tugboat, and this light ship, the Barnegat. That was about a 3-year period. At the end of that, I returned to the museum to build a couple more boats. I had a contract to build 2 boats and return there. That was a golden opportunity, and I knew it. We wound up rebuilding a fleet of boats that race in the Barnegat Bay, the A-class catboats. We built a pair of sandbaggers, which are based in Annapolis, and also a 33-foot catboat. Also started education programs, not just, we always did education programs for adults, but I started getting into education programs for high school kids as well. So after building boats at the museum for 23 years, I became the president of the museum. My focus as president was expanding the education programs, the hands-on education programs for youth, of all the things to be proud of in that spot. The education, getting kids out on the water and teaching them how to build boats and all of that was really what I was most proud of. I was always on the water to be in nature. Right? I did racing and rowing and all these different things, but really the point was to be in nature. So that's what I wanted to communicate to youth, was what opportunities that opens up, and what it can do for you to have those kind of adventures. And in terms of what the museum covered, it was like, well, instead of just being about the commercial history or the naval history of the river, we should also be about the history of the river itself and what happened to it. Yeah, that was just one element. The other was showing what the river meant to various people. Quite frankly, most maritime museums tell you the story of a body of water as it related to white people. And one of my favorite exhibits was Tides of Freedom, about what the river meant to the African American. And it turned out to be quite a bit. And that did two things for me. One is it opened up a whole area of history that I didn't really know anything about. And the other is that it introduced me to all these leaders in the African American community who are extremely enthusiastic and supportive of that effort. That's priceless. So in my time at the Independence Seaport Museum, we started a paddling program that was quite successful, got thousands of people out in the boat basin, next to the Delaware River. It was regarded as kind of dangerous at the time. I think in terms of water quality, there was kind of a hangover of people thinking it was still like it was back in the 80s and 70s. So the idea of actually doing things on the water for recreation was considered a bit radical at the time. However, we paid a lot of attention to making it safe. As I said, it was quite successful. Thousands of people took advantage of the opportunity that we were giving them, and we made some money. During my time at the Philadelphia Ship Preservation Guild, I worked on 3 vessels, the barkentine Gazella, the tugboat Jupiter, and the lightship Barnegat. These are all historic vessels. The Barnegat is really cool. It was built in 1905. It was built originally with a steam plant. It was converted to diesel in the 1930s. It has, if you're a gearhead, it has all this cool machinery on it. Retired from the Coast Guard in, the late 1960s, early 1970s. She spent a period of time in the Chesapeake Bay and then came up to Philadelphia and was part of an organization I think called the Heritage Ship Guild at the time. And that ship was going to sink in a slip, and if she sank there, she probably would have rolled over. So I had a decision to make as to whether I wanted a grounding on my resume or a sinking, and I picked grounding. Rod Sadler, who had Pine Point Marine Services, formed a small nonprofit to take the ship. It was called the Camden Learning Center, I believe. And the ship was transferred from the Heritage Ship Guild to the Camden Learning Center. And then we used the tugboat Jupiter, which is another historic vessel in the harbor here, to tow her over and push her up onto that mudbank. At that time, she was floating, but her 2 end compartments were full and her engine room was springing leaks on pretty much a daily basis. So that was my motivation to get her over here. She's still sitting there, firmly ensconced in the mud, half full of water, and looking kind of derelict, but great. Pine Point Marine Service has now been taken over by the state and the county of Camden County, and there are plans afoot to make it into an education center and park for the enjoyment of the citizens of Camden. And also, there's a new boat coming to the Delaware River, the Firefly. Firefly is innovative in every way. It will be a boat that is powered by solar panels on its roof, so having no carbon footprint, and its purpose will be educating students and the public about the river and giving them an opportunity to see a world out there that they may not otherwise experience. I came to the museum world to build boats, and I had some experience building boats in other materials than wood, and I did not like it. So I wanted to build in wood because it's basically the most pleasant material and the best challenges. You know, I just love the work. At the time, wooden boat building was seen as yesterday's thing. It was regarded as a dead trade, and the only place, well, one of the few places that you could pursue it, there are few around the country, was in a museum setting. So yeah, I mean, I love that work, and it did change my life in many ways, giving me a sense of the history of the place, causing me to fall in love with this body of water, which would have been pretty unlikely had I not had a job like that. One of the reasons that our waterways have the difficulties that they do is that we mess them up and then we take our vacation somewhere else, right? Someplace prettier. And actually, since I've retired, I've made a conscious effort not to do that, right? I wanted to see what was in my backyard. And that came as a result of working at the museum, in the boat shop, and being familiar with some of the river. But now I had the opportunity to see all of it. And that's been very gratifying. The Delaware River has changed remarkably in the last 35 years, and all for the better. The water's cleaner, there's more wildlife, there's more shipping, and there's more recreational use of the river than there ever has been in that 35-year period. And that is really something to get enthusiastic about and hopefully see continue to improve. I think that our attitude towards the waterways has to change pretty radically. We have to stop looking at them as just places where we dispose of things. Nowadays, the things that we're disposing of are whatever's on the road, the roofs, the lawns, all that goes directly into the water. That has to change, which I think is a fundamental shift in our attitude towards the water. So if you're asking me, what do I see for the future? We've gotten halfway there, we have to go the rest of the way.